Judy and I did an ad. I can't remember what year it was. It's for a friend of a really good attorney in Santa Fe called. And they said, hey, I was just contacted by the rum industry of Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And they need a couple to photograph to help support the image of their rum in the United States.
Uh-huh.
And we want you and Judy to be there. We want you to be that couple. So we went to this real fancy, it was out on White Rock Road on Tucson, gorgeous area. It's up a little mesa up Tucson, and these 5 gorgeous houses. And they had this pool overlooking everything. And so they put us up there. They photographed Judy and I at that ad. And then they photographed 4 or 5 other couples from the South and from California. And they were all in this full-page ad. Went in Time magazine, went everywhere. I had so many friends of mine said, what the hell, Ray, are you doing? You're selling your soul for rum. And I said, sure, I will. You know?
And so was that, how did they find you?
This friend, this attorney, he was a really plugged-in attorney in Santa Fe.
I guess.
And they contacted him, and then they wanted a couple. They wanted him and his wife. You know, they were really sharp, and they were well-known in Santa Fe.
Right,
And
I see.
he said, we just didn't want to do it. And he said, I think you and Judy should do this. I said, well, I don't know. So they finally talked to us, and they were nice people. So it was an enjoyable shoot.
Yeah. And were all the couples there?
No, they photographed them in their home or near their home in different regions of the United States. It was an ad with about 5 or 6 photographs, you know, people from the South, New Orleans, Seattle, San Francisco, and us in Santa Fe.
They pay you in rum?
I don't remember. It didn't matter.
Yeah, I know. It was just one of those experiences.
It was an experience, but I had so many friends of mine that called, you know, from all over. They said, what are you doing, you know?
Well, it's a national ad.
Yeah.
I mean, people see that. I mean, it's amazing how that kind of stuff is. I mean,
yeah, just put your name out there, and you know, it just keeps you going. It keeps the ball rolling in the hill.
And now it wouldn't be seen as much because it would be, it's all on the internet, right? If it was social media, and if some big influencer like Mr. Beast did it, then we're on. By the way, got Ray Dewey here.
We are.
Oh yeah. So
are you kidding?
So we talked about the rum thing. We can always cut that out if you want.
Oh, I don't know. You're the Hefe.
I'm El Hefe.
I'm just that's just the New Mexico peon. I like that pot.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like a few things. This is Willard Stone, by the way. The other one.
Yeah, I was curious. I wasn't sure. It almost looks, you know, like a Houser, like a really beautiful Houser.
Yeah.
Oscar Howe, but it's really a beautiful sculpture.
Yeah. So I collect his work. I love Willard Stone. He's just an important Cherokee artist.
Very.
And that was one I just managed to acquire, and I'll show you a couple others I have put away. I don't sell
not
them.
Well known, overlooked till now. I think he's coming in.
Yeah, I mean, at the Gilcrease they know, right? Because they have that huge collection. They did a big show. They did a book, and that's really kind of where I think I first fell in love with him, was in Gilcrease.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, his gars, and just very important artist.
Wonderful.
Very important Native American artist that, you're right, not that many people.
And Oscar Howe's really happening now.
He's starting to happen, right? I mean, he has happened, actually.
He's happened.
Yeah, it's already there. So it's,
you know, when I was, before moving back to New Mexico, when we first got married, I told you, I think the last time I was going to graduate school in Missouri, and I had a project. I set up a project with Dick West Sr. At Haskell. He was the head of the art department. You know, and his son later became the director of the Museum of the American Indian in Washington, an attorney from Albuquerque. But I worked under him for several weeks on this project I had for my master's degree. And so it was so fabulous because through the years I've seen his paintings. And then I've seen recently a couple of abstracts that he did. I wasn't aware that he did abstracts, but he was such a nice man. And I really liked his son too.
And that was when you really weren't even doing Native American as going, oh, I'm going to be a Native. This is for your teaching.
Yeah, teaching. And I was just kind of leaving teaching. I wanted to go to that. I wanted to get into recreational management.
Right.
And that's where I was headed. But I said, I'm going to do a different project. And, you know, the people liked it. So I went out there and
isn't that interesting?
I like Lawrence, Kansas.
I think it's really interesting that you picked him to go out, and
I don't know how it happened. That's been too many moons ago.
But I mean, and that's before you're known as.
Oh,
You're not even
No.
considering it.
I didn't even
at
know who
that
I
point.
was.
Right.
I still don't.
Right. But I mean,
Yeah.
for that's real serendipity there
Yeah.
to see that happen. And then
Mm-hmm.
what, maybe 4 years later, then you start kind of down
Yeah.
your path.
Down the trail. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was so nice. I did a video of it, or actually, it was the time before slide presentation of it for for my work, but he was such a gentleman, and I learned so much. But to be at Haskell, and then to see Allan Houser, he has a super important stone sculpture there, the veteran, the warrior veteran out of stone. It's huge at Haskell. And so I would go in there each day. Wasn't there every day. I mean, I would go several days over a couple months. But to see that, it's very inspirational. And then, later in the last part of my life in Santa Fe, we represented Allan Houser's estate for 5 years.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when we were over where Jed is now,
right,
we had the estate
Jed
there.
Phelps, for those who don't know.
We had it over there because I was always friends with Allan.
Yeah.
Allan
what kind of guy was he?
Oh,
yeah, everybody says that.
I mean,
Everyone
he is
says
he was a blessing to know.
Yeah.
And he would come in a lot to the gallery because we got along super well. He knew I really like Apache material in the culture, just like the basket I'm getting from you today.
Right.
I can't help myself. And and he knew that, he felt that. And so Allan, every time I get something that was Apache and cultural material,
right,
he wanted to see it. So I'd always call him, and he would come, and then we'd go over it. He wouldn't say too much about it. He just was very sensitive, but he wanted to see. He wanted to hold it, be able to see it. And I remember one time I called him, and I said, Allan, you have to come. You really have to come. And I can't remember the history of it, but I had an incredible Apache painted robe. Big, beautiful. And I later sold it to the Dykers, and they gave it to the Met. And this was before they gave all this recent material to the Met. And it was unbelievable hide. And he loved it. He just was he spent a lot of time with it. Usually when I showed him something, I just walked away.
Yeah.
Because I had some warrior caps and stuff like that. Anything that was really fabulous in Apache, I would call him. But on that robe, he spent a lot of time with it. The Dykers bought it, and then they gave it to the Met.
Yeah. And
I saw it there when I was in New York the last time.
You did? You saw it? I don't know if I saw it when I was there last.
It was in I'm sure it's all different now.
Yeah, they rotate,
but it's a big major piece.
Yeah.
But I would always.
And so what years was that you had Allan Houser? Do you remember when that would have been?
I had him after I moved from the plaza at the big gallery. We left there, and then I had an office with Nat on the second floor in the back for a few months, and then Channing Dale and Throckmorton left their spaces,
right?
And John Silver's family owns that building, and John called me, and he said, "Ray, you need a bigger space."
Yeah. Because
I was really down. I just wanted to get down. When I closed the big gallery, I just wanted to have a really fabulous, really old style. I let all my artists go, including Ed.
Right.
Ed was transferred over to Owings. Owings, Dewey at that time, now Owings.
It was like 1999 or 2000?
It was later, I think.
2003.
Anyway, so I went over there, and after I got over there and got settled in that space, which I love that space, and that's where Jed Fouts is now.
Right.
Who's doing a great job, I think. That's when I got a hold of the Houser estate. I knew the family well, and I got along with them all well. And so they started giving material. And by that time, material was starting to come back in the secondary market a bit.
Right.
And then we were handling both the pre-cast, in lifetime cast, and then the post-cast. Some of that, but mainly the pre-cast. And then stone. I love stone. So we had fabulous stuff for 5 years.
That's great. Well, when you think about the people that you represent, I was just going through in my mind today. Yeah. Like, okay, so I didn't even know about Allan Houser. Yeah. So you've got Charles Loloma. Yeah. You've got Gorman. At least you did a lithograph with him at one time.
We can keep going on the artists. Maybe we should stay there. Then I can go back to Gorman. There's some really good stories.
Yeah, okay. So, and then you did a show, a big major show that had Margaret Foya in it, right, as well. Let's see who else. Let me think of who else.
We had a
I know.
major Hubble show. Bill Young brought Hubbles and the Weavers in. We did that probably 1977 or 78, really early.
Yes.
And
Mell, of course.
We did Mell, and we did that first show in 85, maybe 83, 85, but the big show with Maynard Dixon upstairs at Owings, Dewey.
Yep.
And then all Ed paintings, including the big painting.
The jackknife.
Jackknife was downstairs in my space. And it was 85.
Yep. And then who else am I missing that was...
Yeah, well, they did Gail and Ozzy. We ran through them for years. Yeah. They're just wonderful people.
Yeah.
Incredible people. And but as far as artists, Gattignan, early on. Yeah. But I mean, I had a lot of. Yeah, they all count. But I loved in the Native American. I loved the real early paintings. I mean, I had a very major show, almost 70 pieces of early Santa Fe school paintings too.
When was that?
That was before I moved in the big space, and then we had a fabulous show with Bob Gallegos. Bob had put together, he's kind of the master of putting together small collections and selling them.
Right.
But we both, when we first started, Bob was from Albuquerque, and when I was from Albuquerque before Santa Fe, we lived about a block or two apart. But he was an ex-banker. He knows, he's got his stuff together.
Yeah, he's a great businessman.
And very good businessman. And he knew, and I knew that we both loved Pueblo cross necklaces.
Oh, yeah.
And he put together, and I've been buying them.
Right.
So we put it together, and we had a Pueblo cross show. And
I remember that show.
And then Allison Bird did the book on crosses. That's right. So we did that. And
that blew up those things, really made them big, important.
Yeah.
People really go,
and that was a beautiful show. I still have photographs of most of those cross necklaces.
And also as well as you collected them too.
Yeah, with the most famous ones I ever collected, I was sitting in the front of the gallery one day. I wasn't always in the gallery, and I never always sat in the front of the gallery, but I was there one day, and this woman came in. I knew who she was, and it was the famous Asian sculptor, abstract. It's right on the tip of my tongue.
Well, it's not like Mira Nakashima or...
No, but he's right there. I mean, but his sister, man, what lost me?
It'll come in a few minutes.
To me. But his sister lived in Santa Fe.
Yes.
And while she was in Santa Fe, he would visit her, Noguchi.
Okay.
And so Noguchi's sister lived in Santa Fe, and she walked in the gallery that day, and she had an unbelievable cross necklace, tiny. Mm-hmm. It was coral, the cross, and 25 crosses, tiny ones, a little bitty coral cross necklace. Gee, we kept it for years. And it was neat because it had 25 crosses, 12, and one larger one in the center. And we published it for our 25th anniversary. And that was our favorite cross necklace.
And how did she get it, do you know?
Noguchi gave it to her. As a gift, because the sister lived in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
I knew her.
Do you ever get any of his material? God, I love his stuff.
I love his stuff. I know. I've always regretted not getting a Noguchi. But, Elaine Horwich, when we started, Elaine started 6 months before we do, and she represented Noguchi. But I never got one of his pieces. I love them.
Yeah. I could, especially if you love stone. If you could get one of his stone pieces, of course, now they're so expensive. But, you probably could have gotten one back then.
Yes.
There's always those, But,
Elaine wouldn't have given me a deal.
No. Yeah, what was she like? I mean, she was a competitor in a way.
Well, no. Well, I was at her house before she moved to Santa Fe. She said, Ray, I want to open a gallery. I didn't have the gallery in Santa Fe. I was, running around, and I was at a party at her house one Sunday or a Saturday at her house in Scottsdale, Paradise Valley. And she came up to me and said, do you want to run my gallery? I'm going to open a gallery in Santa Fe. I said, are you kidding me? I said, I wouldn't know the first thing about, all the contemporary stuff you do. And
right.
I mean, I'm, honored that you asked me, but, no, I would not have interest. But she moved, she got in there a few months before I did. And then I remember the night, I have pictures, the night I think Judy and I were kind of setting up our gallery. We were a little gallery right next to where Nat's second location is now, 112 East Palace, across from the shed. We were, we're decorating. We're getting ready to open.
Right.
Knock at the door one night, and then here's Elaine with an entourage. Dickie Felser and all her girlfriends. They've been out somewhere, and they came in.
Yeah.
And we were having the best time. And she put on a pair of woolly cowboy chaps, old Stetson hat I had. I put a Navajo woven vest on her, and I wrapped her in a chief blanket. And I had pictures of her. That's classic, man.
And you still have those somewhere?
Somewhere, I guess I do.
And what year would have that been?
That would have been 1976, 76.
76. So that's, and she opened about that same?
Yeah, she opened a few months before I did.
And that was, where was her location?
Her gallery was down where Hecho Mexico is now, down the street on the other side of the Fine Arts Museum on the right. All those buildings right in there, there's 3 or 4 buildings there. They're owned by the foundation from in Santa Fe from the Los Golondrinas.
Yes.
That family owns all those buildings.
Oh, interesting.
And, the original old Spanish market that was in Santa Fe that started in the 20s and 30s.
Right.
That's the building. Elaine's building is where that took place.
Oh, that's interesting.
There's pictures of Henderson in there. William Pennell Henderson in that building.
Yeah, I got to go to his house this last summer.
Yeah.
Go up and see. It was very interesting to see all the radiator grates and the doors and window jacks.
Well, his situation, I knew his granddaughter really well in Santa Fe. She was actually, I would say, one of the most important people in my life in Santa Fe. Her name was Letitia Frank. She went on all the trips with Georgia O'Keeffe, all the river trips. She's a dear friend of O'Keeffe. And she was the granddaughter of Mabel Dodge Luhan. And she was the granddaughter of William Pennell Henderson.
Okay.
And she had control at the time when we first started the Henderson estate, which I knew her well. And then also Nat's mother, Emily Otis Barnes, she was living in Santa Fe. She was up there in years, but they were good friends. And so Tish said, I need to do something with all these paintings and furniture. So basically what she did is she turned it all, the estate over to us. We had like 300-400 paintings, all the furniture, and it just all went to Nat.
Oh, wow.
So that's how that Henderson estate happened.
Interesting.
But I, through the years, of course, I got so much material from Tish. And I was on the board, several boards with her at the museum. And we worked hard from 81 to 82 for the new Latin American wing at the Folk Art Museum together. And she was just a super dear friend. I mean, I really miss her. I had a number of things from Mabel Dodge, and Judy's kept quite a few of them, necklaces and stuff like that. And she had she had Mabel's first phase concha belt, round, unbelievable. And she said, "I just don't wear it anymore. You want to sell it?" So I said, "Yeah, I sell." So we were up. I hope Jerry doesn't feel bad about this story, but Judy and I went to Larry Frank's funeral at his home in Taos. And Jerry was there. Jerry drove up with the Lions, and Jerry came over to me and he said, Peters. Yeah. And Jerry said, I need a birthday present for, Katie. Or it's a big birthday. I'm not going to say which one, but it's a big birthday. Yeah. And I need a special gift. I had through the years sold Jerry some fabulous pots. And he appreciated it. We did a few deals together. And but he said, I need a great gift. I need something really special. So I said, well, I've got Mabel Dodge Luhan's first phase concha belt. He said, that'll do it. Yeah. So he ended up buying that, and he knew about it. He knew Tish real well. He just didn't have access to that belt at that time, but Katie owns it now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, somebody should do a show. I don't know if they have on Mabel Dodge Luhan. All her things, her influence. She was important to Dixon. That's why he went in 31. Yeah. She gave him a free studio space.
Exactly.
So as you well know.
Yeah. And so anyway, and I always, speaking of that time, and he was, Bistrom was there at the same time that Dixon was there. And you know this better than I do, but, Dixon attended a class or something with Bistrom on, the scaling of his paintings, that whole thing that Bistrom was so strong on. And, soon after that, within 6 months later, he did Earth Knower, which, the great painting at Oakland. And, there's also one I saw a few years ago at Denver. It's a room divider. It looks like Earth Knower, but no figure in front. Geometric.
Yeah, it's the geometric one. Yeah. So it is a room divider. It's a screen.
That's after.
Yeah, that was
right after Bistrom.
I think that's in 33 or something when they did that thing. Yeah, and then dynamic symmetry was, had really come in on that point, and Dixon was, and obviously interested in Bellows, who he knew, and they stayed at the same place in New York City. They had the same 1947 Broadway in New York City. Bellows was there, Dixon was there. And
I think some of those paintings, I'd like your opinion, but I think I think I used to own that pot, that Molychrome.
Could be.
We used to own that. Anyway, what was I going to say?
So the early paintings by Dixon and
Taos.
Yeah.
I think they're some of the best paintings.
They are. Yeah. No, I don't disagree. Well, I mean, think about it, right? No, nothing's selling. He's going to sell from 29 to like 35. He sells 24 paintings.
Yeah.
So he's got all 3 kids there. He's always wanted to get back to Taos. He's got a place.
Yeah.
He's at his prime as far as his abilities.
You're right.
Dorothea's there.
Yeah.
He's happy.
Yeah.
He has just won the Harold Mack Award at the San Francisco Art Association. So he got a little money. He had just finished Standard Oil's illustration, and he had done the thing for the Golden Gate Bridge. So he had a little money. He goes out there, takes a car, and he's got 7 months. He gets there in, I think, July 12th of 1931 and stays till January 15th of 1932.
Yeah.
And he paints the greatest things. I mean, he's painting for himself, really.
What did he do, like 20, 30 paintings during there, maybe?
Well, I have his log, and I added them up once. Maybe 40.
Wow.
Yeah, but, Men of Red Earth, Silent Hour, Earth Knower, Watchers from the Housetop. I know. Go on, and Como se pasa la vida, which is a piece
one of my favorite paintings. One of my favorite paintings.
Yeah, one we both had at different shows. You had one in 1985, and I had it in 1996. I believe.
Didn't the son own that?
Yeah.
He owned it. Yeah, he didn't want to sell it when I had it.
Well,
I didn't want to take it out of the house. It was shipped to the gallery before the 85 show, and I just didn't want to take it out of the house. And I kept, trying to see if I could get a hold of it. It wasn't going to go anywhere. So but that was my favorite.
So paintings. People can look it up. 25 by 30. It's this very much O'Keeffe sensibility
very much so. Very much so.
And did you ever meet O'Keeffe? Did you know
No,
her?
I always saw her drive by. I mean, no.
Okay. But you knew.
No, I knew Juan. I knew Juan through Rick Dillingham.
Yes.
But no, I never met her. I saw her. I went out of my gallery one day on Palace, and she drove by in her car in the back seat. that's the closest I got to O'Keeffe. But later, as I said in my earlier interview with you, and I was really involved with the museum.
Yes, you're very much involved.
And so that came back, and she's always been just who she was as a person, as a woman at the time, has my respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough time. To try to make it on your own. That's why I think she said, I'm going to dress like this so people notice me.
Yeah.
And I'm not ashamed of it or afraid of it. I want that.
Yeah.
I think Dixon did the same.
He did.
He's got the hat,
the
cane, the cape.
And I'll jump on the appearances. I'll jump back to something we talked about earlier, even last night, was early on, we got to visit with Louise Nevelson.
Yes, I want to talk about that.
So I'll just skip to that and kind of segue into that, because when we had moved back from Kansas City to Albuquerque, and from 72-3 to 76 when we moved to Santa Fe, we opened a gallery on August 2nd, 1976, with John Cochran, our financial partner from Tucson. I was really on the road. And so one of the things that what happened during that time was, and Judy was still flying. She was a hostess for TWA for 5 years, and she loved to travel, and so she met a captain, a TWA captain named Mac McGinnis, And he was a character. We didn't know a lot about him. I certainly didn't. She didn't either. She said, I took some jewelry we had and sold to my friends. He saw it, and he kind of bought a few things. He said, what's going on? And so GD got acquainted with Mac. We didn't know at the time, but Mac McGinnis was a senior pilot for TWA. And he was crazy about the Southwest. I mean, crazy about it. So when we got to know him, he wanted to come visit us in Albuquerque. And again, this would have been in 1973-4. And so we took him to Charles. We introduced him to Charles Loloma. He really wanted to meet Charles, and he bought a few things. And Mary, and his wife, was gorgeous, kind of tall, really beautiful, striking woman. And she just wore her jewelry so well. So he bought some beautiful things for Miriam. And then, I don't know if it was on that same trip. I think it was. We then came back to Albuquerque, where we lived, and we went up to visit RC Gorman. At that time, RC Gorman, this all gets to Nevelson.
Yeah.
RC Gorman was hot. I mean, he was better known than Shoulder at the time. And, Gorman was a extremely successful, bright guy. And I remember, his dad, Carl, was an artist. He was a code talker.
Right.
And he was his mother, and had an incredible kind of a childhood. But anyway, he was unique. Gorman was unique. And so during the times I would go to Taos, I would go and just introduce myself. We would just talk. So I got to know him, and we had a couple mutual friends together. And so I called him one day and I said, I have these friends from New York that want to come in, and they always want to meet you. So we drove to Taos, and it was magic, man. I mean, Marion and Mac were there, and they met Gorman, and Gorman had a beautiful model in the middle of his room, and he was painting her, and there was a woman over here, I think from the East, and she said, he kind of finished the painting, and we were all we weren't saying anything, and the lady said, your paintings only take like 30 minutes. And he turned around and we call him Rudy, in RC's way, and he said, 30 years and 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
Most artists, I think, will relate to that.
All artists.
But anyway, the McGinnis and him really hit it off, and we all had a great, we went to, we had drinks together at La Fonda Hotel. And so, long story short, in 1970, a year and a half later, Mac I didn't know, but he was really connected in New York. I was surprised for TWA captain. He ended up being the president of the Atlantic Charter of Rolls-Royces owners in the Atlantic Coast. He lived in Paramus, New Jersey. And he said, I want to set up something for RC in New York. I said, fine, So I flew back there, and we met. I don't know if he knew him directly or he had a contact with Frederick Dockstetter at the Museum of the American Indian, and we had that meeting. And, Dockstetter, I don't know if a lot of people know, but he was really, after he got his doctorate, he spent a lot of time at Hopi in Navajo country, a lot of time. In his archives, Dockstetter's archives, you might want to look into this and interview somebody up there, are all at the Museum of Northern Arizona. I mean, we're talking major archives. Frederick Dockstetter right here in Arizona. So anyway, we met with him, and he responded to me, and he said, we'll have a show. So I said, really? We're here at the museum. This is the most important in the museum, So this is 73-4. This is a year or two after the green sale in New York.
Yes.
As we talked about earlier in Sotheby's, it was a very, very important show.
Yes.
And so things were really moving, and I was going to go in a certain direction. And he said, we'll have this show. And so Max set up, first he got TWA to give Judy and I and RC first class tickets to New York. This is the following year. We flew to New York, and from there they took care of us. And so we stayed at their house. We had a luncheon at the Rolls-Royce Club out in Connecticut, and I drove in this. We had a silver cloud, and the car drives into the driveway. It's all full of Rolls-Royces. And so RC was the honored guest at the luncheon.
Yeah.
I don't think any of those owners knew who he was.
Yeah.
And then the next night we went into New York City in the Rolls, and we had 5 others behind us. And so we all drove, and Miriam and Mac were in the front of the silver cloud, and Judy and I were sitting in the back with Gorman. I mean, we felt like,
kings and queens.
Kings and queens.
How did Gorman
Oh, he loved it.
He handled it like, I mean, because he was so.
I mean, that guy, you plug him in, it's like
Yeah.
a 110, it's going to be 220 coming out.
Yeah.
And he was so charismatic.
That's the thing, right?
And he related so well
Yeah.
to so many people. People just loved him, man.
Yeah.
And so we got in there and we all parked in front of the museum, and there were all these private security people to watch the cars.
Yeah.
You know, that museum is not in a great neighborhood.
Yeah.
So we went in, that fabulous show. And then they also had a benefit auction in honor of Gorman.
Mm-hmm.
And Dick Cavett was the auctioneer.
Oh, that's interesting. And this is the Smithsonian?
No,
or
the Museum of the American Indian in New York.
Yes, and that's in the lower Manhattan.
It's way up there, like 96 or 106. It was way up there.
Yes.
Not kind of on the edge.
Yeah. So Dick Cavett was the MC.
He was the MC, and he of the whole deal. And he did an auction, a benefit auction from things that were, quote, deaccessioned from the museum.
Yes.
Dockstader later, I think, got some criticism for that. But it benefited the museum.
Yes.
But during the time we were in New York, Dockstader had set up these tours for Gorman and Mac and Marion, and we went to Nevelson's. RC really wanted to meet Nevelson.
Mm.
And she was, if you read much about her, she liked artists, but she wanted to respect them.
Mm-hmm.
And when Gorman got there, she was dressed all in black.
Yeah.
Her long eyelashes, or everything. And she had her, I remember her husband's name. I think it was Charles. He's a pretty wealthy guy. But they lived down in Little Italy.
Mm.
In this sort of a complex of like 3 buildings. She had her studio and her house, and she was so lovely, man.
Mm.
And she was very connected to Gorman. Gorman was really into it, and we didn't really talk, Gina, we didn't really react to her. I mean, we're talking about New York royalty there.
Right.
But that's, they really hit it off.
Yes. And he knew all about her beforehand?
Oh, he knew all about her.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, he wanted to know all about her.
Yeah. She would have been about 74 at that time.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of people, I don't know if they realize, I mean, she was from Ukraine.
Yeah, she was. That's right. 1899, I think.
Yeah.
She was
so she's an important person.
Super. I love her sculpture.
And I've had a few opportunities, but I just, maybe you probably got them all. But we had a great time. And then I think we visited 1 or 2 other art. We didn't, New York takes a lot of time.
And what was she like, by the way?
She was, I think, pretty reserved.
Yeah, I would think.
She was reserved. She was real focused on RC. He asked her a lot of questions about her work. And she was very friendly. Charles, her husband, they'd been married a long time. He was very nice. Personality-wise, she was real focused on the work. That's what I remember. She was very focused on her work and what was behind it, and how she approached it, because she found that most of it was all done with found objects. Mm-hmm. But, she painted it black.
Yep.
Because she wanted to, the word is regal, or make them more important, but she just was so important. Was
her house filled with her stuff too, or was it just?
I remember it being pretty dark. There was a few pieces. Most of it was in the studio.
Yeah.
But it was. I remember grass in front. I remember a lot about it. I mean, you're going to New York with.
Right, you're in a kind
Gorman,
of a
and you're going to Louise Nevelson's house, and you're kind of like, hey, we are peons here. But very friendly, a good vibe. I don't know if RC ever kept up with her. Touch. I probably didn't.
It's hard to know. He probably owned some of her work, though.
He might have. He had a really good collection.
Yeah, and he made a tremendous amount of money. I mean, he
did. And at the time, I got to meet him. It was just before or after that. He did a number of wonderful early lithographs at Tamarind,
mm-hmm.
and he worked with the master printers there, Ben Adams and Richard Newland. And those guys were at Tamarind. He worked with them on those. And when I was there, they left Tamarind, and they opened Western Graphics
mm-hmm.
in Nob Hill, just east of the university. And I knew Gorman, and I knew those guys. And I said, Gorman, would you do a couple lithographs? He said, yeah, I'll do a couple for you. So he did a small portrait of a woman, a beautiful, it might have been his niece, Nanaba, I think it was her name, Nanaba, and she was a beautiful portrait, side view, had the bun, and
mm-hmm.
then had a big old style,
Jocular.
not Jocular, but a plain turquoise tab.
Okay.
And then I said, I'd like you to do something with a Navajo weaving. And he said, okay. And I said, I'd like to do it as an homage, like an homage to Spider-Woman. That's what I said. And he said, yeah, we'll do that. So he created this beautiful lithograph, a lithograph of a Navajo rug, kind of would look like a 2 gray or like an early crystal.
Mm-hmm.
And then this woman sort of leaning on it, over here. Beautiful lithograph, man. And he just nailed it. It wasn't a big one, but I did additions. And then only on the Natawba piece, I asked him on the earring, I said, RC, have you ever hand tinted those? He said, no, I've never hand tinted a lithograph. So after the BAT, he said, I'll try the BAT. So he did the BAT, and he
tell him what BAT is.
Huh? Bon de terre?
Yeah.
You can tell him. You're the expert.
No, go ahead.
No. And so he did that first one, and he liked doing it. So he did the entire edition hand tinted with that earring.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I'd never seen it before, but I saw it a couple of years ago in Scottsdale at the gallery.
They had one.
Yeah, they had one.
And so I bet you sold those out very quickly.
Yeah, we had sort of the combination between Ben Adams and Richard's contacts, my contacts, museums that I'd been in touch with and stuff. But I did a special edition of 8 out of that edition. I think there was 100, maybe not that many. I don't remember. But I did an edition of 8, and then I donated each of those to major museums for RC's work to get them in the collections, the permanent collections.
Yeah.
And then I used that subtly
in
the marketing to sell that.
Yeah.
And then I also sold the edition out on incremental pricing. So if you were in the first 10, those are certain. The next 10, they just went up. And so by the time the last one sold, it doubled the first ones. Made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
And I sold them all.
And that would have been what year? Approximately
73, 4, 5.
Okay.
4, 5. Yeah.
Right when you're really kind of getting
going. I was getting into it then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're a young man. You're in your 30s.
Late
yeah.
30s, yearly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but a lot of things were rocking then. And, and then Richard Newland, after he left Ben married well. He didn't have the lithographic workshop very long. He married well, I think. And I don't know if he's still living. I always liked the guy. And he and Gorman got along well. And then Richard went on to Houston and founded Houston Fine Art Press. And that was the big press that published all of Gorman's lithographs. I mean, those guys, both of them made a fortune.
Yeah, they would have had to. Because I can remember in about 1988, I'm going to say, going to DeMaio's gallery in San Juan Capistrano.
Yes.
Because I was in the military there.
Yeah. Oh, you
actually. Were. Yep. And he was going to be there.
Yeah.
And
Richard?
No.
Gorman?
Gorman.
Oh, Gorman.
And so we showed up there, my wife and I, and there was a line that went around the block and up the stairs and the thing. And I was like, no. So I can't wait 2 hours to get in there. And I don't even know if I can afford a lithograph. That's the funny thing at that time.
He sold so well.
Yeah. I was like.
But Richard was a master printer.
Yeah.
And, they would do all the printing in Houston Fine Art Press. Richard has a fabulous eye. Very knowledgeable, really a smart cat.
Have to be.
And he has a very strong eye for Native American art, pottery and textiles. And I did some business with him in there. I had to take some of his money. So that was my Gorman story, I guess.
Yeah, and so that was 74
or 5.
4 or
we didn't
5.
move to Santa Fe till 76.
You were still in Albuquerque at that time.
Yeah.
And you're back in Albuquerque, of course, now. And then you open your main gallery. You have a series of buildings. You have one on Palace, right? That's
112 East, which is right across in the shed.
Right. And then you had your next big gallery was the one I was familiar with.
The Plaza.
The Plaza.
Yeah, before we had the Plaza, we had Quinn and Company. They moved out to brokerage. And then next door was some other kind of store. I don't remember what it was. And we took both of those buildings because we put a big rug room in there in the one Quinn and Company. And then I moved kind of where Josh was upstairs and had all that. and loved that. But we had 3 different landlords, and then Jerry bought the building. And I said, Jerry, I just don't want you as a landlord. We'll stay as friends, but I don't want you as a landlord.
Right.
And that's why we moved over to the main place. But during that time, we were really growing.
Yes.
And in about it would have been 76, 77. I had met Andrew Nagin once in Corrales with Ty Campbell. They were at a building right in Corrales, right next to where Judy and I eat breakfast all the time at Nate and Hannah's. And they had the building. I met Andrew there. I knew he never did any business. I knew who he was. And so when we got to Santa Fe, he came up. And he had beautiful weavings. And so I bought him a bunch of them. And then he would keep coming. And I kept buying all these weavings and selling them. And then I said, Andrew, why don't we just do this together? You buy really low and I sell high. We never formed a legal partnership, but we were partners in that regard called Southwest Textiles for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
And he was a challenging guy, personality.
Andrew I met, Andrew I knew. I did a little business with him.
He was,
I have a sense of that.
He was a tough business guy, and he bought hard. And then the other part, a silent partner, Terry won't mind, I don't think. We didn't have a legal relationship, but Terry DeWald was very close to Andrew. And so in a lot of the textiles we got, I mean, I couldn't sell everything, but that's when we got our rug room. We expanded that big rug room next to us, and that was Andrew when we first started. But we couldn't handle all of it. So we worked a lot with Terry DeWald. We bought things with him. We consigned to him. And then I think before Terry probably was into textiles, but we did a lot with Terry. And Terry, I think the world of. He's just an honorable person, individual, his family, his wife, and we just think the world of him. But we did a lot. Andrew did a lot with him. And then Andrew was challenging to work with.
He also changed the whole scene for Hispanic textiles.
He did. He formed a gallery there, and he bought a building right next to his office, and he formed a little. That
was in Corrales.
Right in Corrales on Saltillo and Hispanic weavings. And he had a beautiful, beautiful small collection of Saltillos. And of course, he was always really close with Mark Winter, who is the major collection. But he did a lot. He did publishing. He did talks about it. And I would propose anyone who has any love for Navajo textiles to read an article, very short article, that Andrew wrote in the Collector's Guide in Santa Fe. Probably you can find it on Google. I don't know when it was. It would have had to been
or maybe mid
80s or 90s or something like that. I don't know. But it was a
early
beautiful
90s.
Small article. And, Andrew saw things differently. He was an intellectual, really. He read well. He was very bright. And he had always had the expression, with textiles, the warp that won the West. The warp that won the West. That's a show. But what he did is Andrew saw textiles, and this article you should just read it, is your heart is what you don't see. When you look at something, a lot of people look at art intuitively, and they probably should. They do. But Andrew, he saw stuff from the heart. You didn't really see it, but that's what he felt, and that's what he understood, and that's how he saw textiles. Yes, he was a collector. He was a dealer, a collector, but that's not at the core of what he was. And I think that it's a little article about textiles and weavers, artists, everybody should read. And he was a brilliant guy. I went to his memorial in Corrales, and I was sitting there in the audience. I didn't feel like speaking. We had kind of parted, kind of parted. I was just sitting in the audience, and I didn't know if I could talk or not. It was tough. And so I'm sitting there, and it was outside in the lawn of his home, and this big bumblebee, I always remember it, this big bumblebee came and started flying around the entire people sitting in there. And I said, I got to get up. So I got up, and I talked about Andrew, and I said, this is Andrew. This is Andrew. The spirit of Andrew is that bumblebee. Because he was always that way. Brilliant. And, I think on his inscription of his grave, I think it meant a lot, was that he had an inspiring, the way you lived life, or life with Andrew was very inspiring. And his memory is a blessing. That's on his gravestone. He was Jewish. He had a very strong family ties to himself and his faith. And he was unique.
Yeah, I got that impression.
He's a very unique guy. Terry, if he'd ever talk about it, I know you've interviewed Terry DeWald before, but he knew Terry. He probably knew Andrew even better than I did. I mean, I had a growing family in my business, but it was just Andrew was Andrew. And was focused on Andrew.
What was it about textiles you think he liked so much? I mean, because he was really laser focused on that.
Yeah, he had that sign coming out of the Albuquerque airport. We buy Navajo rugs.
I remember that.
Dude, that brought a lot of business, frankly.
I bet.
And for years, he had that little sign. That's a very good question, and it also extends to saltillos. He got into saltillos.
Oh, yeah, he was that kind of the expert at that time.
I think it was, read the article, I think it was the spirit within those textiles. It's not that you can't really, you can write about it, I guess. You can feel it first. That's what he sensed. There was something within those pieces, and maybe it's the form of the warp and then the structure of it and then the weft coming across it. I mean, I've always had the feeling, and I kind of feel the same way as Andrew, as I look at art, I would say, a lot of people would come in to me and want textiles and really good rugs. And I say, Navajos never made rugs. I mean, these people just come off the street. They were told to come to the guy. I said, no, Navajos didn't make rugs. And they said, I don't understand, Mr. Dewey. You have a whole room of them like you do. I said, no. They started weaving blankets.
Yeah.
They were blankets first.
Yeah.
And then you had a hook with them. And then from there, you took it to, what it was and the trading post and all that stuff. But I think that Andrew had that innate thing. And I think, too, it's just like when you look at certain textiles, and if does it have a cotton warp?
Yeah.
Does it have a homespun single ply, wool warp? Does it have a brown warp?
Yeah.
What does it have? What? And then we're not really going into all the detail, but it tells you a lot about the textile, what the foundation of something is.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting thought, really, because few people examine that as.
They don't think about it.
They don't think about it, right?
Most people don't know even how to ask the question.
Yeah, they don't even know how it's made, first of all.
And a lot of people, I remember one celebrity I had that really wanted to buy textile. Said no. I said no. I said, I want you to go get these. Here's 6 books. Go out and get those books.
Right.
Read those books and then come back. We're going to go. And he did it. And he came back. He's really good. And he bought some really beautiful tech, but he knew what he was doing then.
Yeah, it's much better.
And he could also,
educate.
Mark, appreciate it. The more you know, and the more your clients know, that's going to make a difference.
Yeah. That's why I like doing the educational videos. Educate people so they understand what it is and the people that make them, right? So, these are artisans.
Yeah.
And that's what I think Andrew was drawn to myself. Is the
he approached it. It was an art component. In the very late, he was getting very sick at the end.
Yeah, I remember.
And at the very end, he always did these beautiful little, he would have loved them, abstract sculptures of mainly people in different kind of, they almost looked like little cleaners from a pipe cleaners. They used to put these things together, and they're gorgeous little things. And I went in one time, there were all these things, he kept making them, And then he found a foundry, I think near Albuquerque, this little private foundry, and they cast them. They cast them in bronzes about as big as your stand on that camera, or bigger.
That's interesting.
And they put them in his yard. They were wonderful. They only did 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
But he was I think at the essence of him, he saw what he did as art.
I think so too. And the way he displayed it was that way too. I loaned him some things for a show that he did in his gallery. And I remember how meticulous he was about wanting it to have a certain backing. So it really, everything was perfectly matched.
Color.
And everything. Yeah. And I remember that.
Yeah.
Thinking, wow, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, what was he having on his license plate? I have a picture. Andrew came up one time.
That.
And
Rug guy or something?
No, Bayetta. What is it, Bayetta?
Something, yeah.
Indigo or Bayetta on his license plate. And then I have a picture of him. He always wore cowboy boots. And he drove a Mercedes, that 2-door Mercedes sedan. And he had cowboy boots. And I had a picture of his license plate and his cowboy boots. I probably still have it someplace.
Yeah. We should go through those. And the sad thing is, most people don't know who Andrew Nagin is.
No, they don't. But
Yeah.
if they read that article, Collector's Guide, Santa Fe, and it's just a few paragraphs.
Yeah.
But if you take your time, I told Judy about it today. I remembered it, and we're staying at when are we staying? A beautiful hotel.
Arizona Inn.
We're staying at the Arizona Inn. So I said, come on, we're going to go in the library after breakfast, and I want you to read this. She had never read that article. And I said, sit down in this chair, without saying a word, and just read this.
Yeah.
Because Andrew and I were close. We were all close when our kids were growing up. And so she read it, and she's just kind of in tears.
Yeah. I think I first found out about him in an article in like New Mexico Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I remember being enthralled, like, how did this guy get in this? And it's an article about textiles. I think it was primarily about Hispanic ones, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember that's how I had found him originally when I was just starting off. And, you know, and I was interested in Hispanic stuff, too, because I grew up in New Mexico. And I still love that kind of material. And so,
I think he was very interested in the dyes, the wool,
everything,
the dye, everything. You know, the whole thing as a complete component, you know. But he's very much interested in the dyes and the history of the dyes and all that stuff. And he was knowledgeable.
Yes, sir.
He bought beautiful things.
Yeah.
I mean, I had great things for 8 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so let's talk about Richard Dillingham, too.
Sure.
Rick Dillingham.
Sure.
Because that's another person that affected me with his, because of his book. Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, God, yeah. I had that little 7 families bubble book. I have it still somewhere in my library. It's all marked up. You know?
Yeah.
I learned each one of the things. Okay, this is who this is who this is.
It's kind of hard in some ways to talk about Rick because I will share things, not everything, but I'll share as much as I can think of, is that he was an extremely close friend of ours, super close. And I bought my first Indian pot from him. But he was an undergraduate at UNM. And while we just moved back to Santa Fe or Albuquerque in 73-4, and he was undergraduate at UNM. And it was before he went to Pomona. You know, he went to Claremont College to get his master's. And I always remember because my son ended up at Claremont at Pomona. So did Terry DeWall's son. Fabulous school. And I know that Rick helped get Adam in there. I know that. So, but Rick was a real unique person. We met during the time he was at the university, and he was starting to he was a ceramicist, and he was starting to collect Pueblo pottery. But he was so damn good at it, and he knew about it. He knew as much or more than the potters, but he would collect, he had 2 or 3 beat up Volkswagen vans. And he would travel all over the res and get all this stuff. And then he put really a beautiful collection with Dexter and things together one time. And I talked to Judy's parents, and they bought a small collection. So that's how we started. And I would buy pots from him, you know. And then eventually he moved to Santa Fe about 6 months before we did. From Albuquerque. And then he started working with us at the gallery, the old location, for 2 or 3 years. And he was the one that curated the major pottery show with Margaret in Chapala. He had all the potters there. We had an unbelievable show. And Rick helped with that. And then we also buy things together. We took a fabulous trip in his Volkswagen. I didn't think the Volkswagen would make it. We took off to California. And he had a source in California, in Berkeley. This guy was a machinist and lived in the hills of Berkeley. And I didn't know. I mean, his parents lived in Thousand Oaks, so we stayed the night there. And then we drove to San Francisco, and we went up through artichoke country. And I told Rick, I said, I've never had an artichoke. And he said, we're going to come back. We're going to get some. So anyway, we went out to Berkeley, and we went up to in this hills. Did I tell you this story? So the guy's name, I just can't remember right now, but he was a major machinist. This house, this beat-up house in Berkeley. Weeds, nothing in the sidewalk, and there was a little path, and Rick had called him early and said, come around the back of the house. The back of the house, the basement back of the house, was just a machine shop. Dirty, filthy. He was just filthy, dirty. And he said, I got all the stuff upstairs. So we went upstairs, McMillan. His name was McMillan, I think. And we went upstairs, and it was like a hospital. He took out his trousers. He went upstairs, and Rick, I guess, had been there. He had been there before. But this guy was a meticulous collector. Nothing in the house, no furniture, but a lot of tables and stuff filled with huge Nampeos, Margaret's, historic pots. He'd open a cupboard, all the earliest and best Lucy Lewis's. It was all like perfect. It was clean and perfect. And because he had a cot downstairs where he worked. And then Rick and I bought some incredible pots. And I wish we had more money that we bought more of them. But anyway, we only were there one time. And then we left San Francisco, went back to Thousand Oaks. We got the artichokes on the way. Rick's mother cooked them that night. I never eat them. I'm still not sure I like them. But anyway, we got these great pots. But Rick and I did a lot together. We went to a lot. Judy and I both went. I went especially to a lot of Pueblo dances with him. He was always being invited to Pueblo dances, a Hopi, Santa Clara. And he said, Ray, don't eat anything for 2 days before you go, because we're going to eat lunch like 10 times.
Right.
It's true.
Right. Well, he knew all the potters. He was close to him.
He knew them all.
He buys pottery.
But he could talk pottery, firing, temperatures.
Yeah, he was a ceramicist too.
He could talk everything with them. And he was loved by them.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And he was very important. He did the writings that he did in the Yakima book and I had the 7 Families book.
And the 14 Families. And he
14 Families.
I went to that opening with him.
To
meet him. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only time I actually met him was at that.
I'll send them to you. I've got some wonderful photographs of Rick talking to Judy and I in our big gallery on the plaza. I'll send those to you. They're very special photographs.
And he's also a great potter himself.
He was a great potter.
Very interesting work.
He's a very important potter. And 2 years ago, he had a major retrospect at the Museum of Fine Arts in Santa Fe. It was a beautiful show. It was stunning show. And that was at the same time Judy and I received the Governor's Award at the museum. We were in the same building. We both started together. Yeah, 2 years ago. Same building. We're in there getting our reception. And Rick shows in the back galleries. It was like...
that's synchronicity.
Full circle.
Yeah.
But he was very important to us, and personally too, and his relationships. And Judy, he would always love to dance with Judy, Western dance. There was a great gay bar in Santa Fe that he'd go to. So he took me once and Judy once. I had a torn Achilles tendon, so I had a full leg cast, and I just sat with my back to the wall. I couldn't dance. I wouldn't dance anyway. But he would, he loved to dance with Judy because she's small. He twirled her all the time. But he was a very good dancer.
Yeah.
And he loved life.
Yeah.
Rick loved life. He lived it to the fullest. When he was ill with AIDS at the end, he bought a fabulous motorcycle.
Yeah. Harley
and all the leathers, and a rainy day. With all his medicines, he took off to Death Valley from Santa Fe in the rain. Nothing stopped him.
Yeah.
But in 1978, Rick, Judy, and I, Joe Carr, his first wife, Diana, for 2 weeks went to Mexico in 2 cars. And we went to the Day of the Dead in Pátzcuaro in Michoacan, which we love. We've been there a lot. And we went to the Day of the Dead, and we collected all these ceramics, and we rented a little rowboat. You ever been there? Yeah. Pátzcuaro in Michoacan is west of Mexico City, about 3 hours, and some of the best folk art stuff comes from there. And it also comes from Oaxaca, of course, to the south. But we're very fond of that. But we were there in 1978, and we bought this we rented this little rowboat, really a rowboat, no motors. And this guy rowed us out to an island in the middle of this lake, Janitzio, which is filled with altars of the Day of the Dead. And we hung out there all night till dawn. It was all night, where they celebrate the Day of the Dead. And but we did that, and we went to Mexico City together, and we did all the museums. But we were with him, and then we flew to PV, and we got on the, we got the boats, and we went up on those big things behind the motor boats. You fly up in the sky. We did that together, and we shared a lot. He's an important cat. He's a very important figure in all this. And we were always friends, but he became a competitor of ours because he opened a gallery called Mudd Car Gallery, M-U-D-D.
I know that guy.
And Mudd, that was a family that founded Harvey Mudd School at Claremont.
Yeah.
It's a very prominent California family.
Yeah.
But Harvey lived in Santa Fe part-time, or most of the time. And they all hit it off, Joe and Rick. And so they started their own gallery. And, Harvey owned one of the most beautiful buildings in Santa Fe, and Harvey owned it. So they opened a gallery there. It became my competitors. I'd go over and buy from them. But,
and how long was that open for?
A couple of years.
Yeah, not very long.
Then they moved to another location because Harvey sold it to Jerry Peters for his realty company, Santa Fe Properties.
Always looks easy to do a gallery. It always looks easy to do a gallery, but then the reality may set in that, the real fun for Rick, I'm sure, was being out with the potters, collecting the stuff.
The staying in one place was not his deal. He had to be on the move.
Yeah, that was what his gift was, for sure. And writing, and just letting people become aware of all these great
if
potters.
you have any other questions about Rick, you can ask me, but I could talk all day about him, but
well, that book was what really got me.
It made the market. It made the market.
Yeah.
It really did. And
that and Jonathan Batkin's book on Pueblo pottery.
Yep.
Which also, Jonathan hasn't been on yet, but he says he will.
Well, good. No, Jonathan is extremely bright and very important. He was an interesting guy because, he came as a curator. He was a curator. He'd never been a museum director. And he came as a curator and became one of the best, I think, the best directors that the Wheelwright Museum's ever had.
Yeah, some great shows.
Great shows.
Just
And, he understands it.
Yeah, he gets it, for sure. Who else haven't we talked about that you would like to maybe think or talk about, or just about you?
I think I've talked enough.
I mean, we did an earlier podcast 2 years ago, so people can hear the early component of Ray as far as coming from Colorado and you're being a teacher and all the being at high school.
I think that
college.
There's a couple other
star.
things. No,
you were.
I think the other things that was important in our career as far as art and the gallery. We had met. I will talk briefly about Nat Owings. Nat was my business partner for 25 years. We started, I had moved to the big guy. I had been in Santa Fe from 76 to 81. And then we moved to the big gallery. I had met Nat the first week I was in Santa Fe. Margaret Owings, his stepmother, came in with his father, Nat Owings Sr., one of the most prominent, important architects in America, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, one of the founders, and the famous designer from Los Angeles did all the furniture. So some things I space out on. But they came in the gallery, and Margaret and I just really hit it off. I mean, we really hit it off. We'd only been there a week, Santa Fe. And we really hit it off. And she said, I'm going to introduce you to somebody. So I said, fine. And she said, it's my son, my stepson. I want you to meet him. So she didn't come in with him later. It was a few days he came in. And he, nice guy. And he knew Santa Fe. He knew New Mexico well. His father, the family had a fabulous compound in Jacona, which is north of Santa Fe, near San Ildefonso Pueblo. It was a very important, beautiful adobe compound. And that's where Nat would come in the summers, and he would stay there with his wife. And, he would come to Santa Fe pretty much every summer. He loved He knew it well. And they lived in Albuquerque, actually, before that, the family for a while. And actually right across the street from where I live now in Los Ranchos, right across the street. I think they rented it. They had a little adobe right across the street, but they tore it down, unfortunately. And they're building a huge, mega mansion over there. But anyway, Nat came in, and we hit it off. We really hit it off. And Nat was very fond of Rex Aerosmith. Who wasn't?
Exactly.
And, Rex and him were pretty tight. He'd talk to Rex, and he, so this is sort of pre-Forrest Fenn. And so Nat came in, and we really hit it off, talked a lot, because we were exactly the same age. And my father had moved from Colorado to Santa Fe to be with me. I'm an only child. So he moved there, and he kind of worked with me part-time in the gallery. He just loved to hang around, you know, and he could do everything. The artists loved him. His name was Bud. My father was Bud, B-U-D. Raymond G. Dewey Sr., Bud. He was a cowboy. So he came in, but the fathers were about the same age. And then at the end of the deal, a few years went by, his father passed away a month before my father. That was in 1984. And we really bonded. I mean, we were good friends. And so, but in 1981, I moved to the Plaza, and Nat had been teaching. I mean, he had a PhD in communicative disorders in children. He was teaching university level, and in Bozeman, and he came to Santa Fe. Well, he came to Santa Fe, and I said, "Hey, why don't you just, first of all, why don't you find me some Charlie Russells? Christ, you're in Bozeman. Find me something up there."
Yeah.
And so he didn't find a Russell, but he found some fabulous paintings.
Right.
And he sent it to me on consignment, and I sold him, you know, sent him half the money. And I think it got him thinking about art. He loved it, but he was bright, and he was so well connected. You know, he knew a lot because his birth mother, Emily Otis Barnes from Chicago, wonderful woman. I spoke at her memorial. She lived in Santa Fe. So he had a lot of connections, and he knew a lot of people of the old guard, kind of the Santa Fe royalty anyway, through the family connections for years. And he had a great foundation for that. And then later on, I introduced him to the owner of the house that they bought. He bought a beautiful house, all this acreage, still owns it, I think, in Santa Fe, because they were friends of mine and clients of mine. They wanted to sell it, so Nat bought it. And so we had a lot of connections and did a lot of stuff together. The first day he was in, he had I brought it, he'll probably tell the story differently in every interview, but he brought a little fetish in, a little hunting fetish from Hopi or Zuni. And I said, "What do you want for it?" He wanted to sell it. I said, "Fine, you know, $75 or something." And I went in the back and I gave him a check or cash for $100. It was more than what he wanted.
Right.
That's not Nat. It was worth more than what he asked. So I paid him more than what he wanted. And I think that was kind of the beginning of a relationship that never really ended.
Yeah.
And I think while he was in Santa Fe that summer, he bought a beautiful little Germantown rug for me, Leidazzer, I think he probably still has it.
He probably does.
But, you know, he loved Native American.
Yeah.
But when the next year, I said, after a few years, we knew it was for a few years. And finally in 81, I moved there and I said, "Hey, take a break from the university, get down here and work all summer with me. I'm not going to pay you nothing. I'm not going to pay anything." So he came down and spent the whole summer, and in the whole gallery, Owings Dewey didn't exist. Right. And he came down and worked one whole summer with us. And the guy is very bright, and he's he's challenging, but he can be very charismatic. He can talk about anything. And his family connections are off the chart. Right. So a lot of people would know him and talk to him and knew him, but he could sell anything too. I mean, honest to God, this guy could sell
He
anything.
sold me a few things.
Oh, I mean, he could sell anything, and he was selling like crazy. You know, he was selling a lot of rugs for me, and, you know, he and Andrew, I don't know if he and Andrew got along that well, but Andrew liked the way he sold. But anyway, that following year, the upstairs became available above me at 74 East San Francisco. And originally that was Andy Smith's gallery. Even before Andy was there, Bob Ward was up there, like years and years before that. But, you know, it was the Spiegelberg building, the famous Spiegelberg building. So upstairs, when we moved in, there was a dance studio. Drove us crazy, man. I mean, the people all the window, you know, like lights you were shaking all the time. So finally they moved out, and I talked to the guy who I was leasing from, the old Mr. Kromas, the Greek man, and he leased me that space. And I told Nat, I said, "Listen, we have a space upstairs which is unbelievable, and if you're interested, come." He worked, and then we went up to Andy's and looked around, but we didn't know it was available, I don't think, at that time. And I said, "But we got to knock a stairway in this thing." Right. So we each put together, I think it was about $35,000 together, and we built this real nice stairway through our offices to get up there. Right. We couldn't get up there. Yeah, I remember. So that was the only way you could get up there, other than the big long stairway off the plaza, which is fine. Everybody got used to it. But Nat got a hold of that place, and I told him at the beginning, I said, if you stay with us, you're going to be one of the best art dealers in America. And he has become one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now, he has. And Nat and I haven't spoken for a long time, because when we ended our relationship, we ended it. But we were friends, but, many relationships just end.
Yeah.
And it's not
That's
really
true.
one thing. It's maybe a series of things. But, Nat and I have very different personalities and approaches on life. And so, but and he's so bright. He didn't need me.
Yeah.
But he's just done super well. And Laura Widmar, who's his director, that girl's off the chart.
Yeah. Doesn't surprise me.
She is talented, man.
Yeah. Well, she's also got to work with Nat for all those years.
Well, she's been in 30-some years.
Yeah, so you soak up a lot.
And so she's very bright. She had a really good education she's from El Paso. She's really bright. And a lot of people that, maybe she just gets along with a lot of people. Well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's done well for them. And it's a great business. I mean, and so I'm happy for him. I respect him. I'm happy for him. But, we both had to move on.
Yeah. Well, that's great to know that story, that backstory. And I just wanted to point out one little thing. When you came into my gallery and you're looking at this rug up on my rug rack, and you go,
"Oh, today?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you go, "I know all about that rug, Mark."
Oh,
that
yeah.
blanket.
That blanket, yeah.
So tell them this is a blanket that I have that happens to be in my gallery for sale right now.
Yeah.
And that you immediately recognize.
It's not displayed as well as it deserves. I mean, you got so much stuff and so much, you do such beautiful display, but I saw that, I had seen it on your site some time ago, not too long ago. And I said, I need to call Mark and tell him the history of that. And so I had gotten it was a Germantown, very abstract.
Yeah, that's what
diagonal.
I love about it.
It's modern art.
Yeah, it's modern art.
And it's a Germantown. It's perfect conditions, crazy colors,
1890s.
like a lot of the shirts that you wear. I don't wear them. But I saw the textile, and I brought you in, and I said, listen, that rug, I had that rug, and I traded that Germantown directly, straight across to Jack Silverman for a 1951 Chevy pickup truck.
Yes.
He had an Aspen. He collected GMC and Chevy trucks, and I love Chevy trucks. So I traded him that textile for that truck. And that's the history of that piece. I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story. But
well, you can tell in the back thing you put around the back of it, right?
Oh yeah, I love British racing green cars.
Yeah.
I had a Sunbeam Tiger, 1965, a senior in college. I don't know how I afforded it. I had one, and it was gorgeous. It helped nab Judy.
Yeah.
So I asked Luis Tapia, who's a dear friend of ours, he in Carmela, and he's a great Santero, contemporary. He's got all kinds of national awards now, books on him and stuff. And I said, I want you to do a truck rack around the bed of my truck.
Yeah.
But I want it to look like the railing at Rancho de Chimayo Church,
right.
And he did. But he painted all these bright colors. You would have loved it.
Oh my God.
And with that dark green truck, and it was great, man. I love that truck.
Yeah, the railings might be worth as much as the truck.
I think what I did is once I sold it, I sold the truck, and I gave the railings to Luis.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's nice. He probably still has them.
I don't know.
He might put them on another truck.
I don't know.
I'll have to check with him. Yeah, it's funny in our business, those things happen, where you make trades. I've traded for a Range Rover before.
Yeah.
I've traded for a Porsche before.
Yeah.
Housing all my furniture in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
I traded for.
No, I think that's the real benefit, and it's so much fun with what we do.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of artists listening or collectors. Maybe they'll listen, and they've been involved in trades or barters and stuff, and some of the stuff you don't forget.
No.
They're really special.
Yeah. And sometimes the trades are actually not as good as you would have.
No, they don't end up.
Yeah, I've had a few of those where Range Rover didn't last very long.
I have.
It kind of blew up.
I have too. I traded for a pig once.
Oh, that you got me beat.
I traded for a pig once, and the only reason I did is the people were from my little hometown in Colorado, and she came in with she loved a bracelet.
Yeah,
and it was like I don't know $200 or $300, and I said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Oh, I'm from Rye, Colorado." I said, "That's where I grew up." And she said, "Well, I love the bracelet." I said, "What do you do?" And she said, "We have a farm." I said, "What do you do?" And she said, "Well, I have pigs." And so I said, "I'll trade you this bracelet for one of your pigs." I did. And she said, "Well, they're little piglets."
Yeah.
Well, And so eventually, a few months later, something happened. She said, Ray, are you ever going to, I love my bracelet, but are you ever going to come get that pig? And she said, it's like 200, 300 pounds now.
Right.
I said, no, just give it away to someone who needs it or something. But I can't. What am I going to do with a 300-pound pig?
Well, I guess you could have pork.
Yeah.
Could be one thing. Depends what the pig is. I don't know if it was a...
Yeah. So that was one of my craziest trades.
Yeah.
Judy's put up a lot of trades.
Yeah. Andrew Smith was telling me about one that he did with you for furniture. That
I guess he did. He took advantage of me. Andy's a lot smarter than me.
So those are out there.
Yeah. No, I think we covered most of
Yeah. All
them.
right. Well, this is the beauty of this is there's an earlier podcast people can listen. That's about I don't know. It's in the 308th or something. You can go look it up. And now we have the rest of the story.
Yeah. We pretty much, and we would just end on saying something, our love and our memory of Ed Mell.
Yeah.
You know, since I was interviewed and Ed was interviewed, he passed.
Yep.
And he was a very close friend of both of ours. And I think in his memory, I'd like to sort of dedicate this to him.
Yeah. Nice.
I would have not done the first one with you unless he said, I have to do it with you.
Nice.
But Mark, as you know, he's a special person. And, you know, tonight I'm glad that we're in Tucson now. And I'm glad to be here because I was invited down by Mark for the 150th anniversary of the Maynard Dixon's birthday.
Yep.
So that's why Judy and I are here.
Nice.
And we're staying at the
Arizona Inn.
I probably had the best pancake. I usually order one pancake a lot of times, along with something else. And I think it was the best pancake I've ever had.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great hotel.
And if no one has ever stayed at the Arizona Inn, we stayed there. We told the guy at the desk, we said, you know, the last time we were here was 52 years ago. And he said, you're kidding.
Yeah.
I said, no, it hasn't changed much. It's better.
Yeah.
I can appreciate it more now because it was just a young, whippersnappers then.
That and Hacienda del Sol, that's another one that's just a terrific hotel.
Never stayed there.
That's great.
We've always stayed at Arizona Inn.
Historic one, unbelievable, great food, great ownership. Yeah, close here. It's very close to the gallery.
Yeah.
But Arizona Inn's always a classic.
Oh, it's just such a classic, you know. And I think next month we're going to go up to the Broadmoor.
Yeah,
in Colorado Springs, and we're going to stay there because we've never stayed there. We want to get up there.
Yeah,
we don't need to do that once.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up Ed. Yeah, I put his paintings in my museum because I wanted to have it at kind of a permanent display of his stuff
you know,
too.
Judy and I had never seen the museum, and you just opened it in October.
Yeah.
So we went to it before we came into the gallery we're at now, and it's a stunning museum. Maynard Dixon is one of my all-time favorite painters, and both his writing, his verse, you know, what he wrote, how he wrote, and he reminds me a lot of. O'Keeffe was a great writer, but Maynard Dixon was real special. But to see all that memorabilia and those memories were great. You've done a wonderful job. Congratulations. And you've done a lot for the Tucson and Western art for that museum. Everyone should come see it.
Trying, just like you did. I mean, you were on every board.
Yeah, but I wasn't smart enough to do a museum, nonprofit. So.
Well, talk to me in a while. We'll see how smart it is.
Yeah.
But for right now, it's fun.
And thanks for wearing a more quiet shirt. You know, I think we're sort of coordinated with purple today.
I had a friend who passed, and I couldn't go to his memorial, which is today. So I sent my son instead, and he loved purple, so I wore it in his honor.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you got purple here on the microphone.
Yep.
Tell Charles hi.
Yep. So I'll tell Charles hi.
He's a
David,
good one.
this one was for you.
Yeah, he's a good one.
All right. Very good.
Take
Thank
care.
you, Ray.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye-bye. Yeah, that was great.